In the final moments of World War II, as Soviet forces closed in from the east and American troops advanced from the west, the Nazi regime frantically attempted to erase evidence of its most secret weapons programs, yet one mysterious object would haunt historians for decades. A metallic bell-shaped structure so classified that only a handful of people claim to have ever seen it, and its very existence became the subject of fierce historical debate, whispered testimonies, and wild speculation that would blur the line between documented history and elaborate conspiracy theory. This is the story of Die Glocke, the bell, a technological enigma that allegedly emerged from the deepest depths of Nazi Germany's weapons research, and today we're going to explore everything we know, everything we don't know, and everything we think we might know about this extraordinary and controversial piece of World War II history. Before we dive into the labyrinthine world of Nazi secret weapons and alternate theories, I want to emphasize that what you are about to hear is a complex historical investigation, one that separates documented evidence from eyewitness testimony, distinguishes between plausible theories and outright speculation, and attempts to piece together a puzzle where most of the pieces were deliberately destroyed or lost to history. The story begins not with a clear definitive moment of discovery, but rather with fragmentary accounts that emerged in the aftermath of the war, like pieces of a shattered vessel that were still trying to reassemble into something coherent and understandable. When the Third Reich finally collapsed in May of 1945, the victorious Allied powers launched an unprecedented campaign to capture Nazi scientists, secure weapons research, and understand just how advanced German technology had become during the war years. What they found astonished them. Facilities dedicated to rocketry, jet aircraft, nuclear research, and biological weapons development that suggested the Nazis had been pursuing technological advances that in some cases wouldn't be seriously considered by other nations for many years to come. Among the mountains of documents captured and the scientists interrogated, a particularly intriguing story began to emerge from the testimonies of former Nazi workers and SS officers. Individuals who claimed that in a facility located in Breslau or possibly in another underground location accounts vary significantly. German scientists and engineers had been constructing something revolutionary, something that defied conventional explanation, something called Die Glocke, the bell. The first detailed account that gained any real historical attention came from Igor Witkowski, a Polish journalist and historian who, in the 1990s, published a book claiming that he had discovered references to this strange device in declassified police intelligence documents from the war years. According to Witkowski's research and the testimonies he compiled, Die Glocke was a metallic bell-shaped contraption approximately 2.5 to 3 meters in diameter, constructed from an exotic material called Zerum 525, which allegedly had remarkable and unusual properties that will discuss in greater detail as we continue. The device was supposedly housed in an underground facility, and those who worked on it described witnessing phenomena that they found utterly bewildering. Plants dying around it, strange electromagnetic effects, and most intriguingly, allegation that it was some form of advanced weapon or technological apparatus that German scientists believed could influence weather, produce energy, or possibly bend the laws of physics itself in ways that contemporary science couldn't fully explain. What makes this story so compelling and simultaneously so difficult to verify is that it rests almost entirely on the testimonies of a small number of individuals, some of whom had never been formally trained in physics or engineering, some of whose accounts contradict each other in crucial ways, and many of whom gave these testimonies years or even decades after the war ended, when memories had faded and the fog of time had had ample opportunity to distort the facts. Among the most prominent witnesses was Jakob Sporenberg, a former SS officer who allegedly supervised the project, though he was executed in Poland before he could provide any extensive formal testimony about what he had witnessed. Another key account came from Igor Witkowski's interviews with individuals who claimed to have worked on or near the project, men who are now elderly, whose identities in some cases remain controversial, and whose memories, while often vivid and detailed, exist in a historical realm that's extremely difficult to corroborate or refute through conventional archaeological or documentary evidence. The theories surrounding Die Glocke have evolved significantly over the decades, expanding from the initial accounts of a mysterious Nazi weapon into increasingly elaborate speculations involving everything from electromagnetic propulsion systems to anti-gravity devices to theoretical physics applications that seem more aligned with science fiction than with plausible 1940s engineering. Some researchers have suggested that Die Glocke was a highly advanced electromagnetic device, possibly inspired by theoretical work in physics that the Nazis were conducting, work that might have built upon concepts that wouldn't be fully developed or understood by mainstream science until many years later. Others have claimed it was a weather manipulation device, a kind of proto-HAPE system that could allegedly influence atmospheric conditions on a large scale. Still, others have ventured into even more speculative territory, suggesting that Die Glocke represented an attempt to harness some fundamental force of nature, perhaps related to anti-gravity or exotic physics, theories that certainly make for compelling science fiction, but which lack any solid scientific foundation or compelling evidence. The material alleged to compose Die Glocke, that mysterious Zerum 525, has itself become the subject of considerable speculation and debate. According to various accounts, this substance was extremely radioactive, which would have made working with it extraordinarily dangerous without proper protection and containment, yet the workers who handled it seemingly did so with minimal protective equipment. A fact that raises serious questions about either the accuracy of the testimonies or the nature of the material itself. Some researchers have speculated that Zerum 525 might have been a reference to a real substance or alloy, perhaps something involving rare earth elements or radioactive materials that the Nazis were experimenting with, though definitive identification has proven impossible. Others have suggested that the name was a code or designation, or that it was partially misremembered or mistranslated by witnesses giving accounts long after the war. The scientific feasibility of Die Glocke, if we examine it through the lens of established physics and engineering principles, presents significant challenges to those who would maintain that it actually existed and functioned as some accounts suggest. The core problem is that many of the alleged effects and capabilities attributed to Die Glocke, anti-gravity, weather control, energy manipulation, either lack any theoretical foundation in mid-20th century physics or require physics that even today remains theoretical and unproven. This has led skeptics to argue that Die Glocke was either a misunderstanding of some conventional Nazi weapons project, a figment of imagination or mistaken memory amplified over decades, or perhaps a deliberate piece of disinformation spread by someone for unknown purposes. However, it's also true that during the Nazi period, Germany did conduct research in areas that were far ahead of what other nations were doing. And the lack of conventional evidence doesn't necessarily mean that something didn't happen. It could simply mean that the evidence was destroyed, remains classified, or was never preserved in the first place. The location of Die Glocke, assuming it existed, remains one of the great unsolved questions in this historical puzzle. The most commonly cited location is a facility near Breslau in Silesia, an area that is now part of Poland and was thoroughly ravaged during the final stages of the war and immediately thereafter. Some accounts suggest it was housed underground, perhaps in a salt mine or a specially constructed bunker, which would explain why no physical trace has ever been found despite numerous searches and excavations over the years. Other theories place it at different locations, including the mysterious facility at Peenemünde, where much of German rocket research was conducted, or various other underground installations that the Nazis constructed throughout occupied Europe. The difficulty in pinpointing the location is compounded by the fact that the Nazis were deliberately vague about the locations and purposes of their secret weapons facilities, sometimes spreading false information to confuse Allied intelligence, and the destruction of records at the end of the war means that crucial documentation may simply no longer exist. What we do know with reasonable certainty is that the Nazis were pursuing advanced weapons research in the final years of the war, weapons that in some cases were far ahead of what other nations were producing, and that they were particularly interested in areas like jet propulsion, rocket technology, and potentially even nuclear weapons. Whether Die Glocke fits into this landscape of genuine Nazi research as a real but misunderstood project, or whether it exists primarily in the realm of legend, rumor, and speculation, remains one of the most contentious questions in World War II studies. The post-war testimonies that form the basis of the Die Glocke legend are fascinating from a historical perspective, regardless of whether they describe something that actually existed. These accounts reveal how rumors spread, how memories transform and mutate over time, how people construct narratives to explain things they don't fully understand, and how the mysterious nature of Nazi scientific research created a kind of vacuum that speculation rushed in to fill. Some of the most detailed accounts came from individuals who were interviewed decades after the war, sometimes by researchers with particular theories they were hoping to confirm, which raises the possibility of unintentional bias in the questioning and interpretation of the responses. Additionally, some witnesses may have been describing genuine phenomena they observed without necessarily understanding what they were seeing, leading them to construct explanations that, while vivid and sincere, might be quite different from what actually occurred. The question of the bell's purpose, should it have existed, is perhaps what makes this historical mystery most intriguing to modern audiences. If it was indeed a weapons system of some kind, what exactly was it designed to do? The various theories, weather control, electromagnetic propulsion, anti-gravity, even some form of temporal displacement, suggest that whoever constructed it was attempting to transcend conventional physics and engineering to create something that broke the rules of nature itself. This reflects a broader aspect of late stage Nazi ideology, which in its desperation saw in advanced science and technology a kind of salvation, a way that German ingenuity and determination could overturn the inevitable. Military collapse that became clear as the war progressed. The technological optimism of the regime, combined with its willingness to pursue increasingly far-fetched solutions to the problem of inevitable defeat, created an environment where ambitious and perhaps unrealistic research programs could find support and resources. Whether Die Glocke was a genuine expression of this desperate technological reach, or whether it exists primarily as a post-war legend constructed from fragments of memory and rumor, it certainly reflects something true about the Nazi approach to weapons development in the war's final phase. The declassification of certain documents in recent decades has provided some new pieces to this historical puzzle, though they haven't definitively resolved the question of whether Die Glocke actually existed. Various references to unusual weapons projects, anti-missile systems, and advanced research programs have emerged from the archives, but nothing that unambiguously confirms the existence of a device matching the descriptions in the Die Glocke testimonies. Some researchers believe this is because the project was so secret that almost no official documentation survives, or because what documentation did exist was destroyed deliberately to conceal evidence of the work. Others interpret the lack of documentation as strong evidence that Die Glocke was never more than a rumor or a misremembered description of something else entirely. The truth, as is often the case with historical mysteries, may lie somewhere in between. There may have been some genuine Nazi research project that has been transformed over time into the elaborate legend of Die Glocke, with the details becoming increasingly fantastic as the account moved from person to person and decade to decade. The relationship between Die Glocke and authenticated Nazi weapons programs is another important aspect of the story. We know with absolute certainty that Nazi Germany pursued rocket research at Peenemünde, leading to the development of the V-2 rocket, which would have an enormous impact on post-war rocket programs in both the Soviet Union and the United States. We know that the Nazis were developing jet aircraft, radar systems, guided weapons, and various other advanced technologies. We know they were pursuing nuclear research, though the extent and focus of that research remain subjects of historical debate. In this context of genuine advanced weapons development, the question of whether Die Glocke represented another piece of this puzzle, another thread in the complex tapestry of Nazi technological ambition, becomes somewhat more plausible than it might otherwise seem. The challenge is that the Die Glocke accounts don't fit neatly into the framework of what we know about Nazi weapons development. They're weirder, more fantastic, and less grounded in the physics and engineering principles of the time. The influence of Die Glocke on popular culture and pseudo-history cannot be overlooked when discussing this topic. The legend of Die Glocke has inspired numerous books, documentaries, conspiracy theories, and science fiction works, many of which have elevated the speculative aspects of the story far beyond what any serious historian would claim is supportable. The internet has allowed these theories to flourish and evolve, often mixing genuine historical fragments with elaborate speculation, misinterpretation of scientific concepts, and borrowing from science fiction narratives. This popular interest has both helped and hindered serious historical investigation. It has brought attention to the mysteries surrounding Nazi secret weapons, but it has also made it more difficult to separate historical fact from modern myth. When Die Glocke appears in popular culture, it often does so as something far more fantastic and exotic than even the most generous interpretation of the original testimonies would support, reinforcing misconceptions and making serious historical discussion of the topic more difficult. The scientific community's response to Die Glocke has been, on the whole, skeptical and dismissive. Physicists and engineers have pointed out that the alleged capabilities of the device, anti-gravity, weather control, fundamental manipulation of physical forces, are not grounded in established physics and would require technologies and theoretical frameworks that simply didn't exist in the 1940s and don't exist today. The fact that no functioning prototype or even clear technical plans for Die Glocke have ever emerged suggests to many scientists that the entire story is essentially a legend, possibly based on some genuine misunderstanding or distorted memory of an actual Nazi project, but fundamentally unsubstantiated. However, some researchers have argued that science shouldn't simply dismiss accounts out of hand, and that while the more fantastic claims about Die Glocke are almost certainly wrong, the core story might contain a kernel of truth about some actual research program that simply hasn't been fully documented or understood. This tension between scientific skepticism and the human tendency to believe that witnesses to extraordinary events are necessarily reporting something genuine remains at the heart of the Die Glocke controversy. The possibility of classified research and deliberately destroyed evidence creates a kind of historical unfalsifiability. It's impossible to definitively prove that Die Glocke never existed, just as it's nearly impossible to provide strong evidence that it did. Some researchers have proposed that Die Glocke might have been a conventional Nazi research project that has been distorted by post-war accounts into something far more exotic. Perhaps a uranium enrichment device, or a rocket engine variant, or some form of electromagnetic research apparatus, something real but less spectacular than the legends suggest. The destruction of Nazi records at the end of the war, both deliberately and incidentally, ensures that we may never know the full truth about many of the secret weapons programs that the regime was pursuing in its final desperate months. The bell supposedly displayed peculiar characteristics when activated according to the testimonies that have been preserved and studied. Workers and observers allegedly reported strange electromagnetic phenomena, a peculiar humming sound, effects on biological matter in proximity to the device, and some accounts mention temporal or gravitational anomalies, though these latter claims venture well into the realm of speculation and science fiction. The reported symptoms and effects associated with workers on the project, illness, aging, genetic damage, would be consistent with exposure to radioactive material, which would suggest that if the device existed and workers were indeed exposed to it, they may have been handling something genuinely hazardous without adequate protection. This aspect of the Die Glocke story is potentially the most verifiable, as the medical records of those who worked on it, if they were documented, might provide evidence of radiation exposure or other health effects consistent with the accounts. However, locating and accessing such records, if they still exist, has proven difficult, and many of the workers who could have provided medical evidence have passed away in the decades since the war. The Nazi leadership's knowledge of the Die Glocke project, assuming it existed, remains unclear. Some accounts suggest that the project was sufficiently compartmentalized and secret that even high-ranking Nazi officials were unaware of its specifics, while other theories propose that it had the direct support and interest of Nazi leadership. The late-war chaos of the Nazi regime with competing power centers and factions made it possible for ambitious research projects to exist somewhat outside the normal chain of command, supported by particular patrons who provided resources and protection. Whether Die Glocke, if real, would have fallen into this category or would have been a well-known and high-priority project is impossible to say, without access to documentation that may no longer exist. The mythology surrounding Die Glocke has sometimes been conflated with other Nazi secret weapon legends, creating a kind of composite mythology of late-stage Nazi technological ambition. References to mysterious weapons, underground fortresses, and advanced technology have been mixed together in popular accounts, making it difficult to distinguish what was actually being developed from what exists primarily in the realm of speculation and legend. This conflation has both muddied the waters of legitimate historical inquiry and provided fertile ground for alternative histories and pseudo historical works that use Die Glocke and similar legends as starting points for increasingly elaborate speculative fiction. The challenge for historians is to maintain critical thinking while remaining open to the possibility that some accounts, however extraordinary they seem, might contain kernels of truth about genuine historical events that we don't yet fully understand. The evidence question is perhaps the most fundamental issue when discussing Die Glocke. What we have are testimonies, accounts from individuals who claim to have seen or worked on the device, but we lack what historians prefer: contemporary documentation, physical artifacts, technical plans, official orders, or corroborating evidence from multiple independent sources documented at the time. The absence of such evidence is troubling for anyone trying to establish whether Die Glocke was real, though it's also true that the Nazis were deliberately secretive about their weapons programs and that much evidence was destroyed. The testimonies we do have are problematic in various ways. They come from people whose credentials and reliability can't always be verified. They were often given many years after the war. They sometimes contradict each other in important details, and they describe phenomena that seem to violate established physics or are at least not well explained by contemporary scientific understanding. The reliability of human memory, particularly memory of events from decades earlier, is well established as being far from perfect, and people's memories can be influenced by things they've read, films they've seen, and conversations they've had. It's entirely possible that some of the Die Glocke testimonies represent genuine memories of something seen or experienced, but memories that have been distorted, reinterpreted, and filled in with details from questionable sources. The Nazi bell, if it was real, would represent a remarkable achievement in engineering and physics, something that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in the 1940s. If it was a genuine weather manipulation or anti-gravity device, it would have been revolutionary, changing the course of World War II and the development of physics and technology in the post-war world. Yet no such transformation occurred. The war continued to its inevitable conclusion for Germany, and the post-war scientific and technological development of the world proceeded without any apparent influence from such a revolutionary device. This raises the question of why, if Die Glocke was real and as powerful as some accounts suggest, it apparently had no measurable impact on the outcome of the war or the subsequent development of global technology. Some proponents of the Die Glocke theory suggest that the device was so new and so difficult to control that it was never actually deployed as a weapon, or that it was still in a developmental stage when the war ended, or that its purposes were more scientific than military. Others propose that the Americans or Soviets captured the project and continued it in secret, which would explain why no public knowledge of such a device has emerged. These explanations are possible, but they add layers of speculation to an already speculative historical narrative. And the principle of historical parsimony, that simpler explanations are generally preferable to more complex ones, suggests that it's more likely Die Glocke was either much less significant than the legends suggest or didn't exist at all as a functional device. The attempt to reverse engineer Die Glocke, as the title of our documentary suggests, faces the fundamental problem that we don't actually have the original to work with. We have descriptions from people who claim to have seen it, but those descriptions are vague about technical details, inconsistent in some important respects, and sometimes contradict what is known about the physics and engineering of the 1940s. Nevertheless, some researchers and engineers have attempted to construct theories about how such a device might have worked, what principles it might have been based upon, and what its purpose might have been. These attempts at reverse engineering remain largely theoretical and speculative, exercises in thinking about what might be possible rather than demonstrations of what actually existed. Some researchers have pointed to the work of various scientists and engineers in the Nazi regime who were exploring electromagnetic phenomena and suggested that Die Glocke might have been an application or culmination of such research. Others have looked at contemporary theoretical physics and suggested ways that Die Glocke might have been an early attempt at applying certain concepts in practical technology. These reverse engineering efforts, while intellectually interesting, ultimately tell us more about what modern researchers think might be possible than about what the Nazis actually built. The disposal of Die Glocke, according to some accounts, represents another piece of the puzzle, though again we're dealing with claims that can't be verified. Some stories suggest that the device was transported to safety as the Soviet forces advanced, possibly hidden in Argentina or some other location. Others claim that it was destroyed deliberately by the Nazis to prevent its capture. Still others propose that it was captured by either Soviet or American forces and spirited away to a secret facility for study and replication. These disposal theories often venture into the territory of conspiracy narratives, suggesting that a powerful technology was hidden from public knowledge by governments for reasons of national security or because the technology was deemed too dangerous to share with the world. While governments certainly do maintain classified research and keep secrets, the idea that such a revolutionary device could remain completely hidden for decades while multiple governments work to develop their own versions stretches credibility somewhat. The larger historical context of Nazi Germany's weapons development programs provides a framework for understanding the Die Glocke question. In the final stages of the war, the Nazi regime was investing resources in weapon systems of increasing sophistication and sometimes questionable practicality. The V-2 rocket, for instance, represented a tremendous expenditure of resources and engineering effort, but its impact on the war was minimal compared to its cost. This pattern of investing in advanced, sometimes speculative weapons research, even when it was clear that conventional weapons and strategies were needed, suggests that Die Glocke, if it existed, would fit into a pattern of desperate Nazi technological ambition in the face of military defeat. The regime's leadership was willing to believe in technological solutions to military problems, to invest in weapon systems that were years away from practical application, and to pursue research in areas that promised revolutionary advantages. In this context, an unusual research project like Die Glocke seems not entirely implausible, even if the specific claims about anti-gravity or weather control are almost certainly false or at least unproven. The most balanced historical assessment of Die Glocke would acknowledge several important points. First, that the testimonies regarding its existence come from people whose credibility cannot always be verified and whose memories are subject to the same distortions and contaminations that affect all human memory. Second, that there is no physical evidence, no contemporary documentation, and no corroborating evidence that would ordinarily satisfy historians as proof that the device existed. Third, that the alleged capabilities of the device, weather control, anti-gravity, fundamental manipulation of physics, are not supported by our understanding of physics or engineering either in the 1940s or today. And fourth, that it's entirely possible that there was some genuine Nazi research program that has been transformed over time into the elaborate legend of Die Glocke. But we simply lack the information to determine what that program actually was or whether it actually existed. The bell remains, then, a historical mystery, an enigma wrapped in the fog of war, memory, and deliberate destruction of records. It represents both a genuine gap in our knowledge about Nazi weapons programs and a cautionary tale about how legends grow in the absence of definitive evidence, how human memory and imagination can construct elaborate narratives from fragmentary pieces of information, and how the secretive nature of weapons research creates spaces where speculation flourishes. Whether Die Glocke was a genuine Nazi secret weapon, a misremembered description of some conventional weapons project, a complete fabrication, or something in between may ultimately be unknowable, given the evidence available to historians. What we can say is that the story of Die Glocke tells us much about how history is made and understood, how myths develop, how governments keep secrets, and how the human mind seeks to make sense of extraordinary and unexplained phenomena. As we conclude this exploration of one of World War II's most mysterious legends, we must acknowledge that while we've examined the evidence, the testimonies, and the theories surrounding Die Glocke, the fundamental questions remain largely unanswered. The device may have existed, The testimonies are vivid and detailed enough that something genuine might underlie them, or it may be purely a legend, a modern myth constructed from rumor, misunderstanding, and the human tendency to find patterns and meaning even in chaos. We may never know the truth with certainty, and that uncertainty is itself part of the fascinating history of Die Glocke. A reminder that World War II, despite being one of the most thoroughly documented events in human history, still contains mysteries and enigmas that defy easy resolution. I hope you found this investigation into the mystery of Die Glocke to be thought provoking and engaging, a journey through the shadowy world of Nazi secret weapons and the questions that remain even today about what was really being developed in the final desperate days of the Third Reich. The story of Die Glocke reminds us of the importance of critical thinking when evaluating extraordinary claims, the need for solid evidence in historical investigation, and the persistent allure of mysteries that may never be fully solved. If you have your own thoughts on the bell, if you've encountered other accounts or evidence that might shed light on this historical puzzle, I genuinely love to hear from you in the comments below. What do you think happened to Die Glocke? Was it a real weapon, a misunderstood project, or a complete legend? Your perspectives and insights help us collectively navigate these murky waters of World War II history. Thank you so much for watching this documentary exploration of Die Glocke and the enduring mystery that surrounds it. If you found this video interesting, engaging, or thought-provoking, please consider liking it and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into historical mysteries, forgotten technologies, and the untold stories of World War II and beyond. See you in another video.